Hello there, and welcome back to Tatooine Tableflip. I'm Jimmy, and today we're going to be looking at Naruto the board game from Yoka Games. I'm going to grab a cup of tea, and then we'll get this thing to the table. Naruto Shippuden the board game, released by Yoka Board Games, is an abstract move and battle game set in the world of the Naruto anime and manga, and was designed by Nicolas Bedeau and Cyril Marchiol. You and your friends assume the roles of Konoha's most famous ninja as you strive to keep Tobi and the other members of Akatsuki from resurrecting Gedo Mazo and destroying the world. I was first introduced to the Naruto IP way back in 2003 when, while on a trip to Japan, I was taught the original Naruto card game. I brought some of this game back with me to the US, but it never really caught on with anybody I knew, and so I just sort of ignored it for a little while. A few years and many trips to Japan later, I found myself actually a full-blown Naruto fan. I was really into the anime and the books and the games and everything else. But there was still nothing here in the US, so really the only time I got a taste for it was while I was in Japan. A little bit more time goes by and Bandai America brought the card game here to the US with a few minor changes, and I became really heavily involved with it. It caught on very, very strongly. I mean, people kind of went crazy for it for a little while, but then it burned out relatively quickly, and that's about the time that I started having issues with the IP. See, the card game was suffering that bane of all CCGs, the power creep, whereby each successive set releases bigger and more powerful cards until finally the game just sort of collapses under its own weight. At about the same time, the popularity of the IP here in the US was waning, and in Japan it had all but disappeared. So most of the players were moving on. And myself, I found that I was losing interest in the IP, and I sort of stepped back away from everything. And then I found that I was still a fan, but just not a raving one. So back in 2015, when I'd heard that Yoka Board Games was going to release a Naruto-themed board game, I was quietly intrigued. But after a short period of time and not hearing any more news about it, I kind of forgot about it. It's a fairly light game with an easy to understand rule set once you get your head around the rulebook, more on that later, with one very straightforward goal: stop Akatsuki from resurrecting a being called Gedo Mazo. Here's how it works. Part of the board layout are numbered spaces 1 through 9 that act as kind of a clock as the game is played over 9 rounds. This is Tobi, and he represents where Akatsuki are in the Naruto world and is moved to each ascending space each round as they move across the land, stealing demons in a wacky plan that's far too convoluted to detail here. In fact, the game never references any part of the plan except the goal of resurrecting Gedo. It's actually a simple mechanic, but really effective in its simplicity. You and your friends can choose to play any one of the 6 included Konoha Ninja heroes, making your way around the board trying to catch up to Akatsuki so you can attempt to stop them from gaining the demons that they need. If you do happen to land on the spot where they are, you get to fight one of these 2 Akatsuki members shown up here in these slots, and those are replaced every round, so it basically behooves you to knock them out as quickly as you can. Part of what I found during those fights is, since you're rolling the dice against their fight stat, it's really difficult for one ninja to do that by themselves. So I found that when we ganged up on them, it was a lot easier to overtake them. Now, this success or failure system is tracked up here on this row that has a slot that corresponds to each of the numbered spaces on the board. And you track your success or failure with these tiny, tiny little tokens. One side is the Konoha symbol, the other side is the red cloud Akatsuki symbol. If they manage to steal the demon, you put an Akatsuki symbol face up. If you manage to stop them from stealing the demon in that area, you put the Konoha side up. This comes into play later at the game, so we'll get back to that in a little bit. What I really like about this part is the fact that it feels like a chase. The game is, as I mentioned earlier, timed at 9 rounds. You only get a certain amount of actions per turn and a certain amount of rounds. It starts to really thematically feel like you're rushing to stop this team of evil ninjas from attaining this goal. The other part of this mechanic that I don't like are these little tokens here. These represent the minions of Akatsuki. They have a little trap sign on one side, and on the other side is it might be an exploding scroll, it might be one of their minions. These also are a simple roll and compare mechanic, and thematically falls very flat for me because the only purpose in the game for them is to slow you and your friends down. Frankly, they could have just printed a number on the board and you just roll the dice to see if you can get successes matching or higher than that number to get past that space. And now we come to the main engine that drives the battles in the game, the hero decks. Each hero gets their own specialized deck of cards that I found very thematically satisfying as it evokes the special traits and abilities of each of the heroes. For instance, Sakura is all about healing or strength, where Kakashi is all about the Sharingan, which lets him copy the techniques of his teammates. Naruto's deck just has his signature moves, such as the Rasengan or the Sexy Jutsu. And what you do, during a fight, you'll play one of these cards that lets you activate a special ability or add a dice to your dice pool, or both. You'll roll the dice, and every one of these ninja star symbols is a success. You add up the successes, and you count them against the fight number of who you're battling, and you have to get equal to or higher to win. And when you do win, you do 1 point of damage. And that's not one per success, it's 1 point overall. So if it's one or many successes, as long as you're equal to or higher, you do 1 damage. Which is why earlier I talked a little bit about how we found we couldn't spread ourselves out over the map trying to head them off. We had to basically playing catch up the whole game. And then when we finally did catch up to them, we had to gang up on them. So we were all rolling these fairly large pools of dice and throwing our cards out, and Kakashi was copying everybody so we could do the same thing over and over again, just trying to beat them down. It was not the most satisfying part of the game, but it is a pretty slick little mechanic that, like everything else in the game, is relatively simple. So it's something I can see that young children that might be interested in the show, they could easily pick this sort of thing up and play the game. And the cards, as you see, don't have a lot of text to them, and there's a few symbols that you might have to reference the rulebook for once you learn them. But after a couple of turns, you'll have those down. As the game ran on, it became fairly repetitive. Move, fight, with precious few real decisions to make. But despite this perceived tedium, as we neared the 9th round, that feeling of the chase I talked about earlier kicked in, and suddenly the game became almost thrilling, despite basically doing one of two things, moving or fighting. Now, one of the things I sort of really have an issue with is that at the end of the 9th round, no matter how well you've done, you still have to fight Toby and Gedo. And this felt to me like a giant take that players from the game, as the whole point of the game felt like you were supposed to be stopping the summoning of Gedo. Depending on how many demons they've gathered, their stats could be really, really brutally high. And consequently, we've not been able to beat them once. This was kind of a tough one for me, as I still really do love the Naruto IP. And the game took actually quite a few plays to kind of grow on me. But then something happened. In one of the last games I played, I realized that I was looking at it from the wrong point of view. I was looking at it as if it were a main game for a game night or a deep game. It's not. It's a fantastic filler game, something you play to sort of palate cleanse in between the other bigger, deeper games you and your friends might be playing. It's kind of too bad though because there's a lot of potential in the Naruto IP, and they sort of just let that slide in place of a light, abstract move and fight game. My greatest issue with the game is the rulebook. And I am so thankful that the game actually isn't any heavier than it is because my first hour of my first game was spent getting through that rulebook. It's I don't want to say poorly written, but it appears to have been translated from French with even some artifacts of the language left behind on accident, and could really use a really good editor to put it together. I mean, considering how light the game is, I should have been able to breeze right through that rulebook, and we should have been playing in minutes. But wow, it was actually kind of tough slogging through it. Eventually, we figured it out. One of the things we don't like to do when we're reviewing the games is to go to online and look at play videos or things like that. I do that later, but one thing I like to do is when I'm reviewing something, I want to be able to explain the game after reading the rulebook. I want to be able to have a concise, clear, tight rule set that is easily teachable, because ultimately it's a huge chore to sit down with all of your friends, especially in a game like this where it can be you and up to 4 others. And for each person to have to go through and read the rulebook would just be an incredible investment of time that would better be spent playing the game. And if you can teach a game while you're playing, then your friends learn the game as they go through it. It's much more an enjoyable experience, I found, instead of having to read the book and then trying to come to the table and waiting for everyone else to get through reading the book as well. Overall, I think Naruto Shippuden the board game is a fantastic gateway game to get your non-gamer friends into the hobby. Fans of the show or manga might really enjoy the theme, but they might also long for something a little more, which is why I said it would make a really good filler game on your game nights. Despite some of the problems I've outlined with the game, it's really a lot of fun, and for that it's earned a spot on my game shelf. That's it for this time. Hey, if you guys like the show, why don't you give us a like down there, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new episodes of either the reviews or the unboxings or anything else we might decide to put on the channel later. You can reach us online at boardgamerblues.com or on Facebook and Twitter at @BoardGamerBlues. And if you like, you can send me an email directly. It's jimmie@boardgamerblues.com. That's it for me, everybody. If I'm not traveling across Konoha chasing down the Akatsuki, I'll see you next time on Tatooine Tableflip. Bye!